If your last name is Auerbach, Epstein, Oppenheim, Landau, or Shapiro, you are carrying something most people never question: a location, a hidden map. Before governments demanded surnames, Ashkenazi Jewish families were forced to take names from the towns, courts, and regions where they lived, fled to, or were expelled from. Your surname may be quietly confessing where your bloodline once stood, which border it crossed, which community it belonged to, and what it survived to reach you. And the final name on this list traces back to one of the most powerful Jewish communities in medieval Europe, a place whose authority still echoes today. Number 10. Auerbach. The route points to one of several towns named Auerbach, scattered across Hesse and Bavaria, small settlements that still hosted organized Jewish communities under local rulers, who taxed and protected them in exchange for loyalty and coin. Families who took this name were often bound to a single duke or bishop, dependent on one man's whim for survival. When that ruler died, or converted his politics, or simply needed money, protection could vanish overnight. Later scholarship and communal records tie the Auerbach name to families who scattered eastward after exactly that kind of collapse, carrying a small town's memory into Bohemia and Poland. Most people never hear that part. A name this ordinary once meant total dependence on a single breakable promise. But not every family depended on one ruler's mercy. The next name belonged to a whole region, which meant it survived even when individual rulers did not. Number 9. Frankel, also written Frankel or Frankel. This surname does not point to one village but to Franconia itself, a broad and historically significant region of what is now Bavaria. Jewish communities across Franconia developed their own courts, their own scholars, and their own communal governance, strong enough that the regional name itself became a surname. Families carried with pride rather than a town they were forced to admit to. Land charters and church tax rolls from the region document a dense, organized Jewish presence for centuries. The twist is that a name this broad often signals a family that survived local expulsions by simply moving to the next Franconian town, never fully leaving the region behind, resettling again and again, until the region's name became more permanent than any single address. The next family's name was not a village at all, but a fortress town on a river bend that once belonged to a churchman with real armies. Number 8. Epstein. The route traces to Epstein, a fortified town in Hesse dominated by a castle held by powerful lords for centuries. Jewish families connected to Epstein lived in the shadow of that fortress, useful enough to be tolerated, valuable enough to be taxed heavily, and vulnerable enough to be expelled the moment politics shifted. Records linked to the name show families producing scholars and communal leaders who later rose to prominence across Central Europe. The name does not prove every modern Epstein descends from one specific rabbi, but it belongs to a documented migration path stretching from Hesse into Bohemia and Poland. If this is your surname, your family's story began at the base of a fortress wall. The next name belonged to a family that did not just live near power. They financed it. Number 7. Oppenheim, also carried as Oppenheimer. The root is the town of Oppenheim on the Rhine, but the real weight of this name comes from what certain bearers became: court financiers to emperors and princes, men whose loans built armies and whose signatures backed entire treasuries. Historical records document Oppenheim-linked financiers operating at the highest levels of Habsburg power, trusted with state secrets and enormous sums, then abandoned the instant a ruler needed a scapegoat. That is the twist hiding inside this name. Extraordinary financial power did not guarantee safety. It often guaranteed the opposite, because a court favorite could fall as fast as he rose. Families carrying this name afterward spread across German lands and into Eastern Europe, the memory of that danger embedded quietly in the surname itself. The next name is tied to actual merchant wealth so large it helped fund the printing of early Hebrew books. Number 6. Ginzburg, sometimes Ginzburg. The town is Ginzburg in Bavaria, and the families who carried its name eventually became some of the wealthiest Jewish financiers and communal patrons in Central and later Eastern Europe. This is where the story turns unexpected. A Ginzburg-linked family is documented funding early Hebrew printing presses, an act that helped preserve Jewish scholarship at a moment when manuscripts could be burned or banned overnight. Wealth, this visible, invited both admiration and danger. And branches of the family moved east into the Russian Empire, where their name later became attached to banking houses and philanthropic institutions, serving entire Jewish communities. A name that started as a small Bavarian town became a symbol of survival funded in ink and paper. The next name did not come from ordinary merchants at all. It came from a title. Number 5. Katznellenbogen. This is not simply a town name. It is drawn directly from an actual county in Hesse, a real noble territory, and the Jewish family who carried this name into rabbinic history is documented as one of the most respected scholarly lineages in Ashkenazi Judaism. The name does not mean literal royal blood, but it belongs to a family whose members sat as chief rabbis and legal authorities across multiple regions, wielding real institutional power inside Jewish communal law. That is not a small detail. A surname openly borrowed from a count's territory, carried for centuries by scholars rather than nobles, is one of the clearest fossils on this entire list of how deeply intertwined Jewish communal life became with the feudal world surrounding it. The next name is where the story turns toward war and exile at the same time. Number 4. Landau. This surname points to Landau in the Palatinate, a border region between modern Germany and France, fought over by competing powers for centuries. Genealogies tie the Landau name to a major rabbinic dynasty whose legal rulings were studied across Europe, families who held real religious authority, even while living in one of the most politically unstable corridors on the continent. Border instability meant shifting rulers, sudden expulsions, and religious wars sweeping through with little warning. Families carrying the Landau name migrated east through exactly that instability, into Bohemia, into Galicia, walking directly into regions that would later see the darkest chapters of Jewish history. The name endured that too. The next name belongs to a trading city, and the families who carried it turned commerce into survival. Number 3. Halpern, also Halpern or Alpert. The root points to Heilbronn, a free imperial trading city on the Neckar River. Jewish families tied to Heilbronn were woven into commerce and negotiation, the exact skills that let communities survive repeated expulsions from parts of the Holy Roman Empire. As families were pushed eastward into Poland and Lithuania, the town's name traveled with them, softened by Polish records, then softened again by immigration clerks who barely knew how to spell it. What looks like an ordinary surname today is really a fossil of a specific German river city, carried in speech long after the original community scattered. Most people named Halpern have no idea their name is a passport stamp from a city they never lived in. The next name is not tied to a town at all. It marks the moment a family crossed out of one world and into another entirely. Number 2. Ashkenazi. This surname does not point to a village. It points to an entire civilization. The word Ashkenaz appears in old rabbinic texts, eventually associated with the Rhineland and, by extension, Germany itself. Families who carried this surname were often those who migrated far enough, into Sephardic Spain, into the Ottoman Empire, into North Africa, that they needed one word to explain where they had come from at all. That is the twist. This surname frequently marks a crossing point, a family that moved between entire cultural worlds, carrying Ashkenazi tradition into Sephardic or Arabic-speaking Jewish communities. Old communal records from cities like Amsterdam and Cairo list Ashkenazi specifically because it marked the outsider, the newcomer, the one who did not originally belong there. And now we arrive at the name that changes the scale of everything on this list, because it does not just point to a bloodline. It points to the legal foundation an entire diaspora was built on. Number 1. Shapiro, also spelled Shapira or Spira. This surname traces to Speyer, a city on the Rhine forming 1/3 of the Shum alliance alongside Worms and Mainz, 3 medieval communities whose religious authorities cooperated so closely their rulings shaped Ashkenazi Jewish law for centuries. Speyer was home to one of the oldest documented Jewish quarters in Europe, complete with a fortified community structure, because even at the height of its influence, the threat of violence never disappeared. When massacres and expulsions swept the Rhineland during the Crusades and beyond, families carrying the Speyer name fled east into Poland, Lithuania, and Ukraine, rebuilding institutions from memory. The Shapiro name today, whether attached to a scholar, a merchant, or someone who never questioned it, is one of the last surviving fragments of the Shum alliance, a linguistic echo of a city that helped define what Ashkenazi Judaism became. Every name on this list started as a location, a fortress, a county, a river city, a founding alliance, and somewhere along the way, it stopped being a place and became a family. These surnames survived expulsions, forced migrations, collapsing courts, renamed borders, and clerks who barely knew how to spell them, and they still reached you. They are not just labels on a passport or a mailbox. They are compressed history, carrying the memory of who your family stood beside, what they fled from, and what they refused to let disappear. So, tell me your surname in the comments. Tell me the region or the migration story attached to it, and I will tell you which forgotten name deserves to be decoded next.